America, we need to have a conversation. Between 2009 and 2016, some 86% of mass public shootings took place in a gun-free zone. And that's per Washington Post for May of 2018, not some sort of pro-gun economist. But if you do want to use someone who has done a tremendous amount of research and who happens to be pro-gun, another study by John Lott, a firearm violence researcher, found that the number of mass shootings targeting gun-free zones was actually closer to between 95 to 98%. I don't care what number you want to use, whether it's 86% or something north of that. What stands out is the fact that how few gun-free zones there are, combined with how many public shootings happen in them. These statistics can be argued, they can be nitpicked, but they cannot be ignored. Why gun-free zones? Well, a little personal story. As a former state criminal prosecutor, as well as a defense attorney, I've personally talked to, frankly, more people than I care to remember who are felons or maybe someday felons who have selected victims for their crimes of violence. The people who they rob, the store that they stuck up, things like that. And I always ask them questions about, well, what made you interested in this one? Why did you target those people? The one commonality that I hear time and time again. Doesn't matter if they're in or out of a gang, you name it. They want people who look like they have something of value, who won't or cannot fight back. Bad guys are not looking for a fair fight. They are looking for easy victims. And if you don't believe me, do what I do. Ask them yourself. Now, I know what you're saying. What about the police? If something bad happens, I just dial 911. Everything's okay, right? Well, the average 911 response time is, at best, minutes away. The average violent encounter lasts seconds. You do the math. Logically, statistically, 911 cannot save you. But let's say somehow you get out your phone, you just sense something's coming up, you dial 911, and somehow you get that call out there before the bad guys ever decide to make their move. Heck, maybe you being on the phone is what provokes them into thinking that with your divided attention, you're going to be the easy mark, because that happens a lot. Even if the police do arrive in time, police have zero legal duty to risk their lives to save yours. That is not an anti-police statement. That's the legal reality. And while countless brave men and women in law enforcement have laid down their life to do just that, to risk theirs to save yours, that is far from a guarantee that when you need help, help will come. Remember Columbine, Parkland, Uvalde? Officers surrounded these schools, then stood around as children were butchered. Multiple United States Supreme Court cases, like DeShaney versus Winnebago, Town of Castle Rock versus Gonzalez, and others, have stated time and time again that officers can watch someone attack you and refuse to intervene. You must be prepared to save yourself. You are your own 911. Contrary to perception, mass shootings represent just a tiny fraction of a percent of homicides in the United States. Let me say that again. Mass shootings represent well under 1% of homicides in the United States. They may get the media attention for their unspeakable evil and their sensational nature, but they are not even a drop of blood in the figurative bucket that evil spills each year across our streets. Thanks for coming along for the journey on this video. Do you think this will actually change anyone's mind on anything? What did you find to be the most interesting? Leave it down in the comment field below. If I were to do a second video like this, what statistics, what logic, what reasoning do you think should be cited? Let me know in the comment field down below. Be sure to stick around to the very end where we are using another user-submitted quote of the day. If you want to play in that game, be sure to drop your quote of the day down in the comment field. Don't forget to hit that like button. Now back to the video. So if we want to understand firearm homicides, not suicides, but homicides, as well as the defensive gun uses in the United States, then we need to study the entire picture. To do so, President Obama commissioned a study by the Center for Disease Control to examine this issue more closely. I said President Obama, not President Bush, not President Trump, not President Reagan, President Obama. While highly accurate data is almost impossible to pin down in many fields, the CDC in their 2013 study conducted by the National Academies Institute of Medicine and the National Research Council used studies that cited that there were an average of between 500,000 to 3 million defensive gun uses per year in the United States. It's Chapter 3, page 15, for those of you who are wondering. And while 3 million is argued to be an outlier high number, the outlier low number that a different study suggested was around 108,000 defensive gun uses per year in the United States. Now, no matter which way you look at this, whether you want to take the high of 3 million or the low of 108,000 or somewhere in between, like 500,000, all of those defensive gun uses dwarf the anywhere from 9,000 to maybe 15 to 20,000 homicides per year by use of firearm that we see according to the FBI. Now, to provide some context, because I understand these large numbers, 500,000 defensive gun uses, it's very easy to lose the importance of what a firearm meant to someone in that moment. As someone whose firm represents at any point in time anywhere from about 5 to 15 people in defensive use of force cases, I can tell you, they thank God that they had that firearm. They thank God that they had that ammunition, and they thank God that they had at least enough training to survive to talk to someone like me afterwards. But let's break down that 500,000 number that are saved from defensive gun uses each year, because we have to weigh the historically about 9,000 to 11,000 firearm homicides in the United States each year. Recently, post-2020, it surged closer to about 18 to 19,000. About 700,000 Americans die each year to heart disease. About 250,000 to 400,000 Americans die each year to preventable medical mistakes. 42,000 die each year to traffic accidents, and over 100,000 from diabetes. Flu and pneumonia claim another 53,000. That is not to downplay the significance and the tragedy of losing 10,000 plus Americans to firearm homicides. But it is to say that we should be proportionately directing our resources at what is actually killing American lives. Now, maybe you or a loved one have not had your life saved by a defensive gun use. I understand. You may be wondering, hey, what if nobody had guns? Wouldn't we be living in a better world? Don't guns drive the problem? In a word, no. And let's look at the statistics. If guns were the source of the problem, we would see a statistical relationship between the amount of firearms in a given group of people, as well as the corresponding rate of firearm homicides. But that does not exist. In other words, if there was more guns, we should see more gun homicides. And it doesn't exist. A quick perusal of the firearm homicides per 100,000 citizens in different countries around the world shows that while the United States usually moves somewhere around the 18th to 22nd mark or so when it comes to firearm homicides per 100,000 citizens in any given year, importantly, this is despite having by far and away the most firearms per capita in the world. We're the only country to have more guns than citizens. We've got about 120 guns per 100 capita. Second place in honorable mention goes to Switzerland, who has about 41 firearms per 100 people. Now, if firearms cause crime, then the United States and Switzerland should be first and second for the highest rate of firearm homicides, not about 20th and 68th. If it was guns, we would see a statistical correlation there. But it's not. Meanwhile, if we actually do look at the top 3 countries for firearm homicide rate, they average about 6.5 guns per 100 capita. They have a 16 times higher homicide rate than the United States, and a whopping 555 times higher homicide rate with firearms than the Swiss. Further, a few common denominators of the top homicide rate countries in the world are that they all have fewer guns per capita and significantly more gun control than the United States. If we're looking at the evidence, if you want to talk about statistics, it's definitely not the guns. And this is true even if you want to look inside the United States. The uncomfortable truth is found in what criminologists like to refer to as the law of crime concentration. Super short version, about 1.5% of the streets in the United States account for about 26% of the crime, including firearm homicides. What do these streets all have in common? High poverty and low education levels. Taking those findings and once again now looking at our countries with the highest rate of homicides, we start to see a trend emerge. El Salvador, Jamaica, Eswatini, Honduras, Venezuela, Brazil, and so forth. If this was the guns, Switzerland should be the second most dangerous place in the world. It's not. If this was the guns, then the rural America, who has the highest concentration of firearms per capita, probably in the entire world, should be a deathscape to go through. But is that really the case? No, of course not. The suburbs in the United States have a higher concentration of firearm ownership than major metropolitan areas. But does anybody ever say, hey, it's too unsafe to go to Chipotle or look at the movies or whatever other cliche, suburban, Applebee's, Chili's, whatever it is you want to go to? No, of course not. We all know that you have statistically between a 3 to 4 times higher rate of being killed by misuse of a firearm in a major metropolitan area than you do in the rural or suburban areas. I could keep going on and on and on, hitting you with statistics about how guns save lives and they do not drive crime. Yet I know that, bluntly, if you didn't like these statistics, you're probably still not listening to this video. And therein lies the problem. I do appreciate you sticking around to the end. Be sure to hit that like button. We're going to close out on one of our viewer-submitted quotes of the day. This one comes from user Henry Anania 1640, who quotes Winston Churchill when he said, quote, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." If you want to participate in the show, be sure to drop your favorite quotes down in the comment field down below. Myself and Derek will be sure to vacuum those up and add them to our list. We appreciate you. Don't forget to hit that like button. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, please feel free to check out some of our other great content, and we'll see you in the next one.